I watched my best friend of 43 years cry for the first time in his life last Tuesday. Not at a funeral, not in a hospital bed, not when his wife passed. At a bank, the teller looked at her screen, then looked at Harold, then back at the screen. She tilted her monitor slightly away from us, like she was trying to hide something. "Sir," she said quietly, "your current balance is $412. Harold didn't move. He just stood there, 71 years old, gripping the edge of the counter with both hands. His knuckles went white. His lips moved, but nothing came out. $412. 6 months ago, that account held $347,000. Every penny Harold had earned in 46 years of work. His retirement, his safety net, his dignity, gone. And I already knew who took it, but Harold didn't. Not yet. You're probably wondering how two old men ended up standing in a bank staring at an empty account. How someone could steal a man's entire life savings without him noticing. And why I didn't say anything sooner. The truth is, I didn't have proof. Not then. But I was already building the trap. Let me take you back. Harold Dawson and I met in 1981 at a cabinet-making shop in Dayton, Ohio. I was 25. He was 28. We were both broke, both stubborn, both raised by fathers who believed a man's word was the only contract that mattered. We became the kind of friends most people only see in movies. Harold was a quieter one, steady, never flashy. He drove the same truck for 19 years. He wore the same boots until the soles had holes in them. He never complained, never asked for anything. He married young. A woman named Gloria, sweet, fierce, and funny. They had one daughter, Cynthia. Harold worshipped that girl. He worked double shifts so she could go to private school. He sold his fishing boat to pay for her college. When Gloria got sick in 2014, Harold cared for her at home for 2 years straight, never once hiring help, because he was saving every dollar for Cynthia's future. Gloria passed in the spring of 2016. Harold buried the love of his life and didn't miss a single day of work. He retired at 68 with $347,000. Not a fortune, but enough to live out his years with peace. That's all Harold ever wanted. Peace. But what he got was Derek. Cynthia met Derek Voss at a real estate seminar in Columbus. She was 31. He was 34. Tan. Confident. Talked like he'd read every business book ever printed, but never actually built anything himself. I didn't like him from the first handshake. His grip was too firm. His smile was too wide. And he looked at Harold's house, a modest 4-bedroom that Harold had paid off in 2009. The way a man looks at menu. Beautiful property. Derek said at that first dinner, leaning back in Harold's chair at the head of the table. "You sitting on what, quarter acre?" "Half. Just over a third," Harold said proudly. Derek nodded slowly. Smart investment. I watched him file that information away like a receipt, but Harold didn't see it. Harold saw his daughter smiling. He saw her laughing. He saw her finally happy after years of bad relationships and lonely apartments. So Harold welcomed Derek with open arms. They married 7 months later. That's when everything started to change. The first sign came 3 months after the wedding. Derek convinced Cynthia, and Cynthia convinced Harold, to add Derek's name to the household bills. "Just for convenience," Cynthia said. "Derek handles our finances now. He's really good with money, Dad." Harold agreed without hesitation. Then Derek asked to be added to Harold's bank account, just as a secondary signer. Derek explained over dinner, smiling that big, toothy smile. "In case anything happens to you, Harold, God forbid, we just want to make sure everything's taken care of." Harold looked at me across the table that night. I was over for pot roast, like I was every Thursday. I shook my head, just slightly, just enough. But Harold looked at Cynthia. She was nodding. Her eyes were pleading. "Sure," Harold said. "Family's family." I set my fork down and didn't pick it up again. That night, walking to my truck, I grabbed Harold's arm in the driveway. "Don't do that," I said. "Do what?" "Give that man access to your money." Harold pulled his arm away gently. "He's my son-in-law, Ray. He's not some stranger." "That's exactly what worries me," I said. Harold patted my shoulder. You worry too much, old friend. But I didn't worry enough. Not nearly enough. Because what happened next was worse than I imagined. Over the following months, Derek began reshaping Harold's life. Slowly, carefully, like a man remodeling a house he planned to flip. First, he moved himself and Cynthia into Harold's home. Just temporarily, they said, until our condo deal closes. The condo deal never closed. Then Derek started managing Harold's mail, bills, statements, insurance documents. He bought a locking mailbox and installed it himself. Identity theft is rampant, Derek told Harold. I'm protecting you. Harold thanked him. Then came the subtle insults. Derek started correcting Harold at the dinner table. Small things at first. How he held his fork. How he told stories. Then bigger things. Harold, you really don't understand how interest rates work, Derek said one evening, laughing, right in front of Cynthia and me. Harold said nothing. He just looked down at his plate. I said, he understood them well enough to save more money than you've ever earned. The table went silent. Derek smiled at me, but his eyes didn't smile. Ray, he said smoothly, no offense, but this is a family matter. I am family, I said. Derek didn't invite me back for Thursday dinners after that, but I didn't stop watching. And what I saw over the next few months kept me up at night. Harold started changing. The man who once stood 6 feet tall with squared shoulders began to shrink. Not physically, spiritually. He stopped calling me. When I called him, he spoke in short sentences, like someone was listening. One afternoon I drove by his house and saw Derek's new SUV in the driveway, a black Cadillac Escalade. $65,000 minimum. Harold still drove his 2007 Chevy. I stopped at Harold's door. Cynthia answered. Dad's resting, she said. It's 2 in the afternoon. He's tired, Ray. He's 71, not 90. Let me see him. She hesitated. Then Derek appeared behind her. Ray, he said, blocking the doorway. We appreciate you checking in, but Harold needs a space right now. Space from what? From stress, Derek said. Doctor's orders. He closed the door. I stood on that porch for a full minute, staring at the door Harold and I had installed together 12 years ago. The door Harold built the frame for with his own hands. And now his own son-in-law was using it to keep me out. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something was very wrong, and I was about to find out just how wrong. 3 weeks later, Harold called me at 6 in the morning. His voice was thin, shaky. Ray, he said, can you take me to the bank? Right now? Please. I didn't ask questions. I picked him up in 20 minutes. He was standing at the end of the driveway, wearing a coat that was too thin for the weather. He looked like he'd lost 15 pounds. On the drive, he was quiet. Finally, he said, I tried to check my balance online. Cynthia set up the online banking for me last year, but the password doesn't work anymore. Did you ask Derek? Harold was quiet for a long time. Derek told me not to worry about it. That sentence sat between us like a stone. We pulled into the bank parking lot, and Harold sat in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. Ray, he said quietly, I'm scared. In 43 years, Harold Dawson had never once said those words to me. I put my hand on his shoulder. Let's go find out, I said. And that brings us back to where the story started. $412. The teller couldn't tell us where the money went. She said the account had been accessed regularly over the past 7 months. Withdrawals, transfers, some to accounts she couldn't identify, all authorized by the secondary signer on the account. Derek Voss. Harold leaned against the counter and pressed his forehead into his hands. $347,000, he whispered. 46 years of work. I didn't say a word. I just stood beside him and let the silence do the screaming. But inside, something locked into place. Something cold, something patient. Because here's what Derek didn't know about me. Before I retired, I spent 31 years working for the Ohio State Comptroller's Office. Financial auditing, fraud detection, asset tracing. I wasn't a cop. I wasn't a lawyer. But I knew money. I knew where it hid. I knew how people moved it. And I knew exactly how to follow a trail that someone thought they'd erased. Derek thought Harold's best friend was just some old man who showed up for pot roast on Thursdays. He had no idea who he was dealing with. That afternoon, I drove Harold home in silence. I walked him to the door. Derek opened it, smiling. "Hey, Harold." "Hey, Ray. Everything okay?" I smiled back. "Everything's fine," I said, because the trap was already forming in my mind. And I needed Derek to feel safe, comfortable, untouchable. That's how you catch someone like him. You don't chase them. You let them keep running, right into the wall you're quietly building. Over the next 6 weeks, I worked every single day. I started with public records, property filings, vehicle registrations, business licenses. I pulled everything I could find on Derek Voss. What I found made my blood go cold. Derek had opened 3 LLCs in the past 8 months, all registered to a P.O. box in Columbus. None of them had any real business activity. No employees, no revenue, no filings. They were shells, empty containers designed to move money and hide its origin. He had transferred over $280,000 from Harold's account into these LLCs in 17 separate transactions, all structured just under the reporting threshold. That's called structuring, and is a federal crime. But I kept digging. I found the Escalade was registered to one of the LLCs. So it was a second property, a lakefront cabin in Hocking Hills that Harold knew nothing about. Derek had put a down payment of $95,000 on it. Harold's $95,000. And then I found something that nearly broke me. Derek had contacted a real estate attorney about initiating conservatorship over Harold. The filing described Harold as mentally declining and unable to manage his own affairs. He wasn't just stealing Harold's money. He was trying to take legal control of Harold's entire life. I sat in my kitchen at midnight, staring at the documents spread across my table, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not anger. Anger burns hot and fades. This was colder, steadier. This was certainty. I picked up the phone and called the one person I knew could help me finish this. Margaret Chin had been a forensic accountant with the FBI for 22 years before she retired. We'd worked together on 3 state fraud cases in the early 2000s. She was sharp, relentless, and she owed me a favor from a case in 2006 that I never collected on. "Maggie," I said, "I need your help." "Ray, it's midnight." "I know. It's important." I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for 10 seconds. "Send me everything you have," she said. "Tonight." Within a week, Maggie had built a complete financial profile of Derek's fraud. Every transaction, every shell company, every dollar traced to its final destination. She also connected with a contact at the local DA's office, someone she trusted. But I didn't want to go to the authorities. Not yet. Not until Harold could see the truth for himself. Because the hardest part of this wasn't catching Derek. It was making sure Harold's daughter couldn't pretend she didn't know. On a Sunday afternoon in March, I invited Harold over to my house for coffee. Just the 2 of us, like the old days. He looked thinner, older. His eyes were dull. Derek had been telling him that the bank had made errors and the money would be restored soon. Harold wanted to believe it, needed to believe it. I set a folder on the kitchen table. "Harold," I said, "I need you to look at something." He opened the folder slowly. The first page was a printout of his bank account. Every withdrawal over 7 months, highlighted in yellow. The second page showed Derek's LLC filings. The third showed the Escalade registration. The fourth showed the cabin in Hocking Hills. The fifth page was a conservatorship inquiry. Harold read each page. His hands trembled. His breathing changed. When he reached the last page, he set the folder down gently. He didn't cry this time. He looked at me with something I'd never seen in his eyes before. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't anger. It was resolve. "What do we do?" he said. "We already did most of it." I said, "Now we finish." The following Thursday, I arranged a meeting at Harold's house. I told Derek it was about estate planning, something I said I wanted to help Harold with as a friend. Derek loved the idea. He probably saw it as another opportunity. He had no idea it was the last door he'd ever walked through in that house. At 4 o'clock, Harold sat in his living room. Cynthia sat beside him. Derek sat across from them in the leather recliner he bought with Harold's money. I arrived with 2 other people. The first was Margaret Chin. The second was a man named David Phelps, assistant district attorney for Franklin County. Derek's smile faded the moment they walked in. "What is this?" he said, standing up. "Sit down, Derek," I said quietly. He looked at Cynthia. She looked confused. David Phelps set a briefcase on the coffee table and opened it. "Mr. Voss," he said, "my name is David Phelps with the Franklin County District Attorney's Office. We've been reviewing financial records associated with 3 LLCs registered in your name. Records that show a pattern of structured withdrawals from an account belonging to Harold Dawson, totaling approximately $346,000. The room went dead silent. Derek's face didn't just fall. It collapsed. Every layer of charm, every practiced smile, every rehearsed excuse, all of it crumbled in 3 seconds. That's not. Harold gave me permission to manage." "Mr. Voss," Phelps interrupted calmly, "authorization to co-sign an account is not authorization to transfer funds into privately held shell companies for personal enrichment. That is embezzlement. The structuring of those transfers below federal reporting thresholds is an additional felony." Derek turned to Cynthia. "Tell them," he said, "tell them your father wanted this." Cynthia's mouth opened, but no words came out because she was looking at Harold, and Harold was looking at her with the quietest, most devastating expression I've ever seen on a human face. It wasn't accusation. It wasn't rage. It was the look of a father realizing his daughter had watched it happen and said nothing. "Daddy," Cynthia whispered. Harold held up one hand, just one hand, and she stopped. David Phelps gave Derek 2 options that afternoon. Option 1. Full restitution of all funds within 90 days, forfeiture of the cabin property, dissolution of all 3 LLCs, and a signed confession that will remain sealed unless Derek violated any terms. Option 2. Criminal prosecution on multiple felony counts, including elder financial abuse, embezzlement, and structuring, carrying a combined sentence of up to 15 years. Derek chose option 1. He signed the papers right there in Harold's living room, sitting in the chair he claimed as his own, in the house he never built, surrounded by the life he tried to steal. He didn't say a word as he signed. When he stood up, he looked at me. "You did this," he said. "No," I said, "you did this. I just made sure it was documented." He walked out the front door. Cynthia followed him. She paused at the threshold, turned, looked at Harold. "Dad, I—" "Go," Harold said softly. She left. The door closed. Harold sat in his chair for a long time. Margaret and David quietly packed up and said their goodbyes. I walked them to the door, shook their hands, and came back to the living room. Harold was still sitting there, still staring at the door. "You saved my life, Ray," he said. "No," I said. "I just did what you would have done for me." He nodded slowly. Then he said, "Something I'll carry with me for the rest of my days. I don't blame Cynthia," he said. "Not completely. I blame myself for raising her to trust the wrong person. But I also blame myself for not trusting the right one sooner." He looked at me. "You tried to warn me in that driveway, and I didn't listen." "You listened eventually," I said. "That's what matters." It took 4 months for full restitution. Derek sold the cabin, sold the Escalade, liquidated everything. Every dollar returned, verified by Margaret's accounting. Harold changed his locks, changed his bank, got a new account with one name on it. His. Cynthia called him twice in those 4 months. Both times Harold answered. Both times they spoke for less than 5 minutes. He told me he wasn't ready for more than that. "Maybe someday," he said, "but not yet." I didn't push. Some wounds don't heal on a schedule. One evening last month, Harold and I sat on his back porch, watching the sun drop below the tree lean. He'd gained some weight back. His color was better. He'd started going to the senior center on Wednesdays to play cards, something he hadn't done in over a year. He sipped his coffee and looked out at the yard. "You know what the worst part was?" he said. "What?" "It wasn't the money. Money comes and goes. I've been broke before. He paused. It was sitting in my own house and feeling like a guest, feeling like I needed permission to exist in the life I built. That's what he took from me. Not dollars. Dignity. I nodded. But you got it back, I said. He smiled. A real one. The first real one in a long time. Yeah, he said. I did. We sat in silence for a while. Two old men on a porch. No agenda. No drama. Just the sound of crickets and the last light of the day well lived. I tell this story not for sympathy, not for applause, and certainly not for revenge. I tell it because somewhere out there right now, there's an older man or an older woman sitting in their own home, feeling small, feeling confused, feeling like the people they sacrificed everything for have turned their love into a transaction, and they think they're alone. You're not alone, and you're not powerless. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is ask for help. Sometimes the bravest thing is admitting someone you love has become someone you don't recognize. Harold didn't lose his money because he was foolish. He lost it because he was generous, because he trusted, because he loved his daughter more than he loved caution. And Derek didn't fail because I was smarter than him. He failed because he underestimated the one thing no con artist ever accounts for: loyalty. Real loyalty. The kind forged over 43 years of pot roast dinners, hospital waiting rooms, driveway conversations, and a quiet promise two young men made in a cabinet shop in 1981. I've got your back, no matter what. Some people think that kind of friendship doesn't exist anymore, but those people have never met Harold Dawson and Ray Sheldon, and they never saw what happens when you try to break what we built. If someone you love is being taken advantage of, don't wait. Don't assume it'll work itself out. Don't stay quiet because it's not your place. It is your place. That's what love means. The quietest people in the room are often the most dangerous, not because they're planning harm, but because they're paying attention. And when they finally act, it's already over.